is Pittsburgh Midwife. I'm a home birth midwife in the area, and I have been practicing for about 9 years now. I was honored when Diana asked me to come and present today because I am super, super passionate about health and freedom and birth choices and birth options. And of course, I'm speaking about pregnancy and birth. So there's probably a lot of people here going, oh great, the first speaker. I really have nothing that I need to listen to her about. I've already had my babies, I'm done, I'm a man, I don't birth. Or you might even be younger and be like, I'm not having babies for a really long time. So why should you listen to what I have to say today? One, we've all been born. We all have somebody in our family that was born at home, and you probably don't have to go back very far to get to someone who was born at home in your family. So birth impacts every single one of us in some way, shape, or form. And we all know somebody who has been through a pregnancy that has been hellacious, that has been stressful, and you might be able to step back and realize how much of that was imposed upon that person from their care provider versus how much did they actually experience on their own. So today I would like to talk to you a little bit about how do you have a fully informed pregnancy and birth and postpartum period, and how do you get empowered in the first place to be able to take care of that brand new baby. So my business started about 9 years ago. My background is in nursing. I started out in nursing school and graduated in 2000. So I'm still the ripe old age of 29. I just keep circling that age frequently. But I managed to get through nursing school and never saw birth. I had no interest. I avoided it like it was the plague. I thought that birth was scary. I thought that birth was dangerous. I thought that birth was gross just as a whole. And I quickly realized that I was gravitating very strongly towards home care. I really noticed a huge difference in my clients and in my patients that when they were taken care of at home, their outcomes were completely different. I had people who were actually rested enough to pay attention to the education that I was providing them. I had people who were comfortable enough to be able to retain the information that I was teaching to them. I had people who were able to have the visitors that they wanted to have at their home that provided them the encouragement to be able to continue down that road of recovery. And it didn't take long for other people to identify and say, you know, I think you really might like hospice. And I thought, that sounds really morbid. Like, why would you want to do that? And so they said, well, why don't you shadow one of the nurses and see if you like it. And I quickly found out that hospice was the only area of nursing where I didn't have to do anything to hurt anybody. Ever. I got to do things that brought people comfort. I got to be able to actually take time and listen to what they had to say and how important that was for those people who were on that journey of recognizing that they weren't going to live forever, which we all need to realize, because we're just not. So I started to dabble more into hospice, but I still would go back and forth between hospice and home care, and that's the majority of my nursing experience. So how did I get into midwifery? Doesn't really make much sense, right? I'm helping people out. How do I get to helping people in? So I have 3 children. My oldest just turned 18 this May. And I also have an 11-year-old who's soon to be 12 and a 10-year-old who's soon to be 11. So 6.5 years after the birth of my first son at the hospital, which was very medicated and very processed and very terrifying and very, oh goodness, there's a crisis. Every corner you turn, there's a crisis. But I was a healthy young woman. Why was that happening? My second pregnancy, I was bullied and harassed the entire pregnancy. There were multiple markers on ultrasound that showed that my child was most likely going to have Down syndrome. And how selfish could I be as a single woman to bring a child into the world who was most likely going to have deficits and require care long after I died? Why didn't I terminate? Why didn't I get genetic testing? How selfish could I be? Every appointment, are you sure you don't want to terminate? You really need to think about beyond yourself. This is a very selfish decision. So it was extremely stressful because every month I knew I had to go to another appointment and I was going to be harassed, and I was already in a relationship that was very abusive. So I'm getting it from all angles. So I birthed my son after a very long and traumatizing labor. He was born and he was perfect. 0 physical deficits, 0 neurological deficits, no neurodivergency whatsoever. And I looked back and I thought, why did I go through that? My son was 4 months old when I found out my daughter was coming. Surprise! And I thought, mentally and physically, I can't go through this again. I just can't. So at that point, I hired a midwife for my daughter's birth. And after she was born, it was abundantly evident where God was leading me, and it was not to allow another woman to have to go through what I went through with the bullying and the harassment for potentials. So I started into midwifery. I trained with another midwife in the area, and now I practice independently. I'm also an NRP and CPR instructor, so I travel all throughout the country teaching that to other midwives and providers so that they can have skills that are applicable to them, not hospital-based skills that don't apply to them, so that they know how to resuscitate an infant if that is necessary. So that's kind of how I got to where I am. But what I want to talk to you more about today has to do with how do you choose a provider for birth care? For a lot of people, it's a financial decision. They say, well, I didn't recognize that my insurance would even cover a home birth midwife. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Sometimes it's a crapshoot and you don't find out until afterwards. But with any insurance, you do know that you have a copay and a deductible. And most of the time, that is significantly more than the cost of having a home birth midwife. Some people say, I don't know if I'm a good candidate for a home birth. Talk to a home birth midwife if that's something that you're curious about and you want more information about. But all in all, you do have to choose a care provider for that pregnancy and childbearing year. How do you go about doing that? Where do you even start? Where do you begin? Talk to people, please. Please talk to people, hear their stories. Be willing to witness the stories that are ugly and find out where did those ugly stories come from, because most of the time it's because they started with a cascade of interventions. One intervention led to the next, which led to another bad outcome, which led to the next intervention, which eventually ended up in a surgical birth, which eventually ended up in a postpartum mood disorder. Every mom that walks through a hospital's doors, and don't get me wrong, hospitals definitely have their place, and there are times that moms and babies need what they have. And I'm super thankful and grateful that they're available to those moms and babies who need what they have. But 1 out of every 3 moms that walks through the hospital doors will result in a surgical birth. Society hasn't gotten this far for 1 out of every 3 moms to be broken. It's just not even remotely close to possible. We have not lost 1/3 of all moms in childbirth before birth was in the hospital, and it's only been in the hospital for about 100 years. Statistics that are important for you to know and to share with the people that are in your circle. Of those moms that have a surgical birth, which is 1/3 of all moms that walk into the hospital, 1 out of every 200 will become addicted to opiates. That's the risk that you're taking whenever you look into, maybe I'll just go to the hospital because that's what you do because birth is scary. Is birth really that scary? Do you pick up your dog and run them to the vet because puppies are coming? No, we kind of just trust the process. But it's important to talk to people, find out their stories, see where the negative ones come from, be willing to let somebody say, yeah, I had a home birth. They'll say it real quietly most of the time. Listen to the people who have those stories. Find out what was it like. Talk to the husbands. So gentlemen who are here today, that is the number one thing I can say. Talk to the other dads. Because I love nothing more than to see a husband and wife come in and the husband goes, I'm not so sure about this. I'm worried about her. I'm concerned. I don't like dads that come in and don't have questions. You don't take your role as a husband and a father very seriously. Your role is to protect and provide. And if you're not concerned about protecting, I'm concerned about what kind of a husband you are. So dads, talk to the other dads and find out information about it. I love that 50% of my referrals this year came from dads talking to other dads in the workplace. I just think it's great that dads are talking about birth now. But you want to interview your provider long before you're pregnant, if at all possible. It requires a lot of time to figure out who is the best fit for you. How do you figure out who's the best fit for you? Once you have that interview, see who talks more. Do they want to get to know you, Or do they just want to tell you all the things that they can tell you about them? Is this someone that you can have intimate conversations with? Or are they going to ask you, how's your sex life? And you're going to go, you want to know about what? You want to know if my husband and well, I already know that you have sex. Like, you're pregnant. Let's just let the elephant in the room be seen. I know that happens, but if you're having a problem in that area, who are you going to talk to? Your midwife. That's who you should talk to. Every expectant mom needs a midwife. Some need a doctor too, but every mom needs a midwife. So interview potential care providers. Find out when you ask questions about, well, I was wondering what my choices and options were about X, Y, and Z. And if they say, well, the policy is, our protocol is, you can realize that you're going to be set up on a script, and that's how the rest of your pregnancy is going to go. They have expectations for you to be a compliant patient. And if you're not compliant, you're going to be facing a whole lot of backlash. So if you ask questions, and the question is turned back around to you to say, well, what do you want? Well, I want to know what you do about delayed cord clamping. Okay, what do you want? It's your option. And that's how all healthcare should be. Not just maternity care, all healthcare. You should be able to go to a provider, and the provider should look at you and say, so it seems to me that you're dealing with this issue. Here's option number 1. Here's your pros, here's your cons. Here's option number 2. Here's the pros, here's the cons. Here's option number 3. Here's the pros, here's the cons. Which one do you like? And if you need more time to make a decision, why don't we talk about it at your next appointment? How many people have ever experienced somebody saying, here's your choices and options, let me know what you would like? That's what an out-of-hospital midwife should be providing to all of her clients, and the ones that I know of and the ones that I work with and the ones in this area, that's the kind of care that they're providing. You want to find out how far away is this person? Are you a good candidate for an out-of-hospital birth or a home birth? And in this area, what you're looking at is you have the option of hospital birth at several hospitals. You have the option of a birth center with certified nurse midwives. They are very medicalized. Are they a little bit more open to you having some choices and options? Yes. But I realize there's a lot of people who birth at the birthing center, and they have beautiful experiences. They are very satisfied with their care. But as a home birth midwife, most of the time, if you're very satisfied with your care, you stay where you're at. I hear a lot of stories of other people saying, I didn't know if my partner was going to be able to attend my birth because they can't mask. And if my partner can attend my birth, I don't know who's going to watch the kids, because the kids were supposed to come to the birth and now it's only one person. And I wanted to have birth support as a doula, but I don't know if my doula can come because they have restrictions now. I have never stopped seeing my clients at all in the past 9 years. Not at all, not one time. I didn't say, oh, we all have to do virtual visits. How do you do virtual visits and actually assess someone's health and wellness? You can't. You can't, unless you already know them very, very, very well and know that they're already on a path of health and wellness and you're just doing a routine check-in. But you can't measure a mom's belly. You can't listen to that baby's heart rate. You can't check a blood pressure. Those things are super duper important. You want to find out what's going on in that arena. You want to find out, what does their backup look like? What choices and options is that? And what's the general tone of their response to your questions? Are they annoyed? Are they put out? Are they looking at their watch? Are they trying to find out while you're interviewing them, how much longer are we going to be going through this? Because this is the same process that you're also going to follow whenever you have to pick a pediatric care provider. So it's not just, oh, we have to have somebody help us get the baby here. You're then going to have someone who's going to provide pediatric care to your child. Who's going to do that? How do you interview them? These are the same types of questions that you're going to want to ask, and you're going to want to watch everything outside of what they say as much as you pay attention to what they say. It's also very important to find out when you're looking at a care provider, who's going to actually be attending your birth. A lot of times I've had clients say, yeah, I met with this OB through every single appointment and they agreed and they were fine with everything in my birth plan and I felt so comfortable with them. But when I showed up to the hospital, that's not who was there. and I was vulnerable, and I was already in labor, and I needed somebody to provide me care, and I was stuck. Everything that I wanted went out the window. I got yelled at. My husband got separated from me. They took him away. They took my baby away. And all those things were in my birth plan and nobody followed it. And they're not just traumatizing to the mom. They're traumatizing to the baby who's having their neural pathways written. And the generational damage that causes from their brain to their child's brain to their grandchild's brain, it just continues. So the decisions that you're making have a lifelong impact, not just on you, but on your children's children. So you want to keep those things in mind as you're choosing a care provider. If you're choosing a mainstream provider, the responsibility to research all the choices and decisions that you have to make falls on you entirely, as does your advocacy for yourself. I can promise you there's no one in that office who is going to be going to bat with you to make sure that your choices are respected. You have to have that in yourself. And you also have to have that in your partner. So making sure that you both are on the same page, you both can verbalize what you want in a respectful and kind way. I just had an appointment this morning and we were talking about, well, if we did have to go to the hospital, how does that look and what do we need to do? And oftentimes, because we're used to having to fight so hard for everything that's important to us, we're used to going in a very adversarial way. We are going to make sure that we are not trampled on. We are going to make sure that we are heard. We are going to make sure that we're respected. And I can tell you time and time again, when you start that off in a very hostile way, the opposition shuts down to hearing anything you have to say. So when you can recognize these people are doing the very best that they can with what they've got, and they truly believe in what they're doing, and it does not align with what I consider to be health and wellness. So if you can meet them where they're at and say, thank you so much for the information you've provided. I really, really, really respect that, and I appreciate your care and your concern. Can we have just a minute to think about this privately? And then we'll get back to you. Or if you already have a midwife who's working with you, and working with you to advocate and educate you, and you choose to have that in addition to a doctor, then you can go back to the midwife and say, so this is what they're telling me. I'm not so sure that I agree with this. What do you think? And she says, that's wonderful. Let them know that you understand this is what they'd like to do with your baby, but you've already set it up with your midwife and she's gonna handle that for you. It helps a ton, because then they're off your back. And then you and the midwife can say, okay, so what's your decision? Did you want to do that test? Did you want to do that vaccine? Because the state's tracking all of it. The state's tracking whether or not you did all those vaccines. They're tracking every test that you did with your newborn, and they're keeping a log. So those things are all super duper important to make sure that you're paying attention to.